Hey LearnDash fans. In this video, we're going to talk about spacing in focus mode, specifically around the main content area. So the main content area basically starts with the page title. That could be either your lesson, your topic, or your quiz title based on what content you're viewing. And then it's got the breadcrumbs and whatever content you've added in the editor here. And then if it's a lesson and you've got topics inside of it, you'll have those. So all of this basically in this large white area on the right side of the navigation, all of this is your main content area. So most people want to adjust the spacing a little bit here above this title, but I'll also talk a little bit about the spacing to the left and to the right as well, if you want to adjust that. So before we get into any CSS, I do want to point out that the width here, basically from here to here, this is first and foremost controlled in your LearnDash settings. So let's hop over to the admin area and we go to LearnDash LMS and settings, and you'll be on the general tab. Once you've enabled focus mode here, this option for content width appears. The default is 960 pixels. Now, of course, this is only going to be 960 pixels if you're viewing this on a laptop or a desktop or a screen that has at least the space to show 960 pixels. As somebody views this on a smaller screen, a tablet or a mobile device that doesn't have 960 pixels from left to right, obviously that content is going to shrink down and just fit within the available space. But this is the width for larger screens. So I'm going to just use the default here in this example, but keep in mind if you have changed this to something else, you could be seeing something slightly different, specifically with the left and the right spacing. The code that I show you should work, it shouldn't matter which one you use here, with the exception of full width. That one might require some additional coding, but any of the other options here, the code that I'm going to show you should work for all of them. But I'm just going to keep it on the default for 960 for now. So keep in mind, check this first. This is the first kind of line of defense you have in terms of changing the width of the content. But now in terms of the rest of the padding, what I'm going to do is just show you some CSS code here. So I'm going to open up my inspector tools here in my browser. And we're going to go to, so this is the H1, this is the actual title. The parent item here is this div called LD Focus Content. And as I hover over this, you'll see the yellow spacing around it. So the LD Focus Content itself is highlighted in blue, and then in yellow is the padding that is applied. That is, as you can see above the title, that yellow padding is what's adding the space between the header at the top and then the page title. So if we come down here and take a look, we see there's this code right here with the padding of 5M being applied. When you just see padding and then a value, that means it's being applied to all four sides. So if I click this little arrow, it'll show me padding top, right, bottom, and left are all 5M. So that's why you see an equal amount of padding being applied all the way around it. You'd see that if we scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see 5 pixels, or 5 Ms, excuse me, of padding down there at the bottom. So now that we know what's happening here, we can apply some CSS. So I'm just using a little browser extension here to add some CSS code. So I'm going to comment this back out, and you'll see here I'm using the same exact CSS selector right here to focus on just the LD Focus Content. And I'm just adding a padding top value of 3M. So instead of 5M at the top, it's only going to be 3M. So when I save this, you'll see this area right here shrink a little bit. So let me come here and save that. And there we go. Now there's only 3M of padding instead of 5M. You can change the M to a different unit. So if you don't want to use M's, you'd rather use pixels, you could do something like 50 pixels. That will also work. That happens to be right about the same as the 3M. We go to 80, you'll see it gets a little bigger. If we go to 30, it gets much closer to the header. So you can adjust that there. I kind of like 3M. It's just a good amount of spacing there at the top. Now, the other thing we need to think about here is when we get to smaller screens. So LearnDash applies some additional CSS as we get down to screens under 640 pixels. So here we are now viewing this as if we're on a pretty small tablet or a pretty large mobile phone. 640 pixels is kind of in between those two. But you'll see now that we've got some different things. If we hover over LD Focus Content again, now this looks a little different. So we have an orange space at the top, then we have the yellow padding around it. If we come down here, you'll see what's happening. So the padding is now using percentages and not M. So it's using 5% on the top and the bottom, and then 1.5 M on the left and the right. In addition to the padding changing, we also have now margin being applied, which wasn't being applied before. So this is saying, we can click this arrow to open it up, top margin of 30 pixels, right is auto, bottom is 50, left is auto. And then same thing with the padding, we can open that up and see top and bottom are 5%, left and right are 1.5 M. So now that we've got this margin at the top, we might not want the additional padding. So in my view, this is too much spacing here at the top. It doesn't match the spacing on the left and the right. So what I would do here is I'd want to set this padding, instead of 5% on the top, I'd want 0 on the top. So the way we can do that is I'm basically going to use all of LearnDash's selectors that they've used down here. And I've written this up already in CSS right here. So this first media query says only apply this CSS if the screen size is under 640 pixels. So then this only is going to apply to those smaller screens. And you can keep the margin exactly the same. You actually don't even need this line, so you can just completely remove and delete this altogether. If you're okay with that margin, you don't need to do anything with it. And then what we'll do here is we'll say padding 0 on the top, 1.5 M on the left and the right, and 5% on the bottom. So we're just changing the top value and changing it from 5% to 0. So when I enable this, you'll notice that it got rid of that extra padding up there, and now it looks pretty close to the same on the left, the right, and the top. Now, if you wanted to have that margin still in there, 30 pixels, what was it, auto, and 50 pixels, I believe. You can have this here, and then since we set the padding to 0, now the only value that we need to move up or down is going to be this margin. So let's say you just wanted 20 pixels, there we go. Let's say you wanted 1.5 M, there we go. That should match exactly to the 1.5 M padding on the right and the left of the content area, so that should get you something just about perfect all the way around. But again, feel free to use pixels if you'd like to use pixels. So that shows you really how to update that top padding, but it kind of really goes into the left and the right as well as we get into it down here with the media query. We can open this back up, and I will just show you adjusting this padding. You know, let's say we're here in this view. Let's say we've got a screen that this is about 1085 pixels wide of this screen, and if we have the navigation open, we've got this content area here that's a little bit small from left to right, but it's got a big gap on both sides. So what we can do here is we're going to use this, just the top code, because we're still in basically desktop mode or big screen mode because we haven't gone below 640 yet. So we do padding top of 3M, but we can also do padding left of 3M. We can also do padding right of 3M. And when I save that, you'll notice some of that spacing there on the left and the right is gone, and there's more room for our content area. But we can also use what's called shorthand. So if we just write the word padding, then we can write all 4 values for top, right, bottom, and left, and they go in that order. So the first one is top, so let's say we want 3M on the top, and then maybe we only want 1M on the left, 3M on the bottom, and 1M on the right. So we do that. Now our content is a lot closer. That's probably too close in my design opinion, but I'm just showing you how you can adjust that padding. And then again, as soon as we get down to below 640, then that's where the other CSS here in this media query kicks in, and we need to adjust it again, because this is always going to override the default for the larger screen. This code is going to take over once we go below 640 pixels in width in the browser. So I hope that's helpful. It was a little bit of CSS lesson, but also a good lesson in how to adjust the padding and spacing around your main content in the LearnDash focus mode.